I remember the rain that day, not because it was stormy or dramatic, but because it was quiet, slow, misty, like the sky itself was unsure of what it was doing. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks away from a hotel I'd never been to, staring at a message that wasn't meant for me. Same room. 6 p.m. Don't be late this time, sexy winking face. It popped up on her tablet, which was still linked to her phone. A tech oversight she had long forgotten. I wasn't snooping. I was just opening Netflix. But sometimes life hands you the truth when you're not even ready to carry it. My name's Halden. I'm 41. I write operating manuals for forklifts and industrial loaders. I know, wildly glamorous, but I've always liked the stability of it. Predictable words for predictable machines. It made sense. It worked. Marriage, though, not so much. My wife, Marble, was everything I wasn't. She was lightning, laughter in inappropriate places. She made people feel seen. I used to think I was one of those people. I used to believe we were the couple others looked at and quietly envied. Nerdy guy, vibrant woman, somehow in sync. But I should have noticed the shift. The good morning kisses became pecks. Her phone always face down. She started working later hours, though she worked retail. She was always tired when I wanted to talk, always on edge when I brought up vacations or weekends. And then this message. First, I laughed. Genuinely, I thought it was spam or a prank. But then I saw the contact. Grant HVAC. Grant didn't fix heaters. He was her heat. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just shrunk, like my chest caved in on itself. I felt smaller than the car I was in. Still, I didn't want to believe it. So I drove like a fool. I followed the time and address from the message, heart stuttering the whole way. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't plan a dramatic confrontation. Honestly, I just wanted her to look me in the eye and lie one more time so I could stop hoping. The hotel was one of those places with outdoor entrances where the rooms are right there beside the parking lot, like a row of secrets with locks. I waited, hunched in my car like some sorry detective in a cheap crime novel. At 5:58, I saw her. Hair done, lipstick red, the kind she hadn't worn around me in years. She was smiling at her phone, and she went inside room 112. I waited 2 minutes. My legs were shaking as I stepped out. I told myself, "You're just going to knock. That's it. See what happens, then leave." But I already knew I wouldn't leave the same. I walked up to the door. I knocked twice. From inside, her voice was soft and flirty. "That was fast. Did you miss me that much?" She opened the door wearing nothing but a silky robe and a grin, until she saw me. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and her grin shattered. The silence between us was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. I didn't say a word. Not yet. But that moment, that expression, that panic, it told me everything. Marble's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She just stood there, barefoot on the cheap carpet of room 112. The collar of her robe slipping slightly off her shoulder. Her lipstick suddenly looking too loud for the silence. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her mascara had smudged a little from the rain, or maybe the heat inside, but all I saw was fear. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that knows it's been caught mid-lie with no way out. "Not Grant," I finally muttered, my voice barely making it through the lump in my throat. She blinked, her face twitching like she couldn't decide which lie to reach for first. "Halden, what are you? Why are you?" "This isn't." "Don't," I said more quietly than I meant to. "Please, don't make it worse." I stepped inside, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't keep standing in the doorway of that moment anymore. It felt like standing on a cliff where the earth behind me had already crumbled, and I had nowhere left to go but forward, into the wreckage. She closed the door slowly behind me, and the click of the lock was the loudest sound in the room. I didn't look at the bed. I didn't need to. I saw the wine glasses, 2 of them, the half-burnt candle on the dresser, a Bluetooth speaker blinking on the nightstand, the room of preparation, of intention. This wasn't a one-time slip. This was a ritual, a routine. "How long?" I asked, not because I wanted to know, but because I needed to confirm just how deep the betrayal went. She looked away, tightening the robe around herself like it would somehow protect her from the consequences of her choices. "It's not what you think," she said. I almost laughed. "Oh, good," I replied, my voice suddenly turning brittle. "Because what I think is that you've been meeting another man in motel rooms while telling me you were working late. What I think is that you changed your passcode and stopped kissing me like I mattered because you were giving all that to him. But please, tell me what it really is, Marble." Her hands trembled, and for a second, I saw a flicker of the woman I used to love. But it was gone just as fast, replaced by some stranger who looked like her but was too busy fabricating versions of reality in her head. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "You didn't mean to get caught," I corrected. Silence again. I looked around the room like I was inside someone else's dream or nightmare. I saw her purse on the armchair. I walked over, unzipped it slowly while she stared, saying nothing. I pulled out her phone and turned it toward her. "Passcode," I said, her jaw clenched. "Halden, please. Passcode." She relented. She gave it to me. I typed it in. I went straight to the messages with Grant HVAC. The thread was long, too long. Pictures, jokes, inside jokes, screenshots of our own arguments she had apparently shared with him. One of them was of me apologizing for something trivial, me trying to keep us together, captioned with, "He's such a sad little puppy." My stomach turned. I scrolled further until I hit something that made my knees go weak. A voice memo. His voice. "Last time was incredible. Your moans were still echoing in my head when I got home. You make it so easy to forget he even exists." I handed the phone back to her without a word. She didn't take it. She couldn't even lift her hand. I turned toward the door. "Wait," she said. I paused. This part, I still can't believe it happened. She said, "Don't tell anyone, please. If my sister finds out, if my mom. You don't understand how much I have to lose." I turned back to her, slow, deliberate. "You're worried about what you'll lose?" I asked. "I've already lost everything." She cried then. I wish I could say it moved me, that some part of me cracked open with compassion, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not hate, not even sadness anymore. Just a sort of vacancy, like she'd knocked the last remaining part of me out of place. I opened the door. The hallway outside was dim and damp. My shoes squeaked slightly on the tile as I walked away. She didn't follow me. Of course, she didn't, because she wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing the convenience I used to be. I didn't sleep that night. I drove around until sunrise with the radio off and my mind playing reruns of her face when she opened that motel door. That shocked gasp, the one that had nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with inconvenience. That was what really broke me. I wasn't her sorrow. I was her problem. I ended up parked in front of a 24-hour laundromat somewhere across town. The lights were flickering, and the place looked half-abandoned. Suited me. I sat in the car, staring blankly at people walking in and out, wondering how many of them were dragging their own hidden messes behind their backs. Affairs, secrets, lies, silent divorces, and homes where wedding photos still hung on the walls. When the sun finally rose, I realized I hadn't decided what I would do. I hadn't planned anything beyond walking out of that motel room. There was no dramatic escape bag, no plane ticket, no friend's couch waiting. Just an apartment that felt like a graveyard filled with souvenirs from a life I'd now have to grieve like a widow. At around 7:30, I returned home. I didn't expect her to be there already, but I also didn't expect her to walk through the front door at 8:05 a.m., carrying a bag of bagels and 2 iced coffees like it was just another lazy Saturday morning. Like nothing had exploded. Like she hadn't looked me in the eyes last night and begged me to keep her secret buried. "Morning," she said gently, as if testing the temperature of the room. "I thought you might be hungry." I stared at her. She placed the coffee down on the counter, avoiding eye contact, her voice trembling just enough to sound human but calm enough to infuriate me. "We should talk. But maybe we can eat first?" I let out a short laugh. Dry, painful. "Eat." She nodded. "You didn't eat dinner last night, right?" "No," I said. "Because I was too busy watching you unwrap yourself for another man." Her lips pressed together, and for a moment, she looked like she might break. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me the way a manager looks at a customer complaining about a valid refund. I messed up, Halden. I did. But don't you think we can just talk about it? Maybe get some help? A counselor, maybe? A counselor? I repeated. She nodded again, a little faster this time, as if saying the word more confidently would somehow erase the betrayal. I mean, people go through rough patches. Maybe we can figure out what led to all this. No, I said, leaning on the counter now. You don't get to say what led to all this like it was a shared mistake. You cheated. You made choices. I was here at home, loving you in silence, while you whispered lies into another man's mouth. That landed. She flinched. But then, like clockwork, the defense mechanisms came online. I was lonely, she said. You were always in your head. You stopped touching me. You don't even look at me the same way anymore. I stared at her, stunned by the speed at which the blame had shifted. You know why I stopped looking at you that way, Marble? I said quietly. Because I thought I wasn't enough. I thought you deserved better. I thought if I worked a little harder, talked a little softer, maybe you'd feel loved again. But now I see you were just looking for someone who didn't know the real you yet. Her breath caught. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. And maybe in a way I had. She walked to the couch and sat down, rubbing her temples. So what now? She asked. You want a divorce? I didn't answer immediately because the truth was, I didn't know. I wanted to scream yes. I wanted to throw her things onto the street and slam the door behind her. But my heart was still chained to the idea of us, even if the version I believed in had been dead for a long time. I don't want anything from you right now, I said finally. Not a meal, not a talk, not your tears. I just want space. Time. She nodded slowly. Okay. We sat there in silence for the next hour. She scrolled through her phone. I stared out the window. The coffee went warm, the bagels went stale, and the marriage, I think, finally died completely, right there between the kitchen counter and the couch where she used to fall asleep in my arms. Over the next few days, our apartment became a place of strange noises. Drawers closing a little softer, footsteps slower in the hallway. Her sighs were longer, like she thought if she exhaled hard enough, she could blow away what she'd done. But I wasn't listening for her anymore. I was listening to the silence between us, the one that used to be filled with laughter, arguments, music, us. Now it was a vacuum, and every sound that echoed through it just reminded me how empty things had become. She didn't mention the motel again. She didn't mention him either. Instead, she tried to patch things up the way you might patch drywall. Smooth it over, paint it up, hope no one notices the cracks underneath. She started doing things she hadn't done in years. Making my favorite breakfast, putting on old music I used to play, wearing that green sweater I once said made her look like the reason trees bloom in spring. It was like watching someone play a version of themselves they barely remembered how to be. But I couldn't unsee it, couldn't unknow it. One night, I found myself scrolling through our shared photos on my old tablet, just trying to remember when she stopped looking at me like I mattered. There were signs. I could see them now. Her smile was still there, but the light behind her eyes had shifted. She was there, but she wasn't. And then I found it. Picture from 9 months ago. We were at the lake. I just made her laugh, and she was mid-smile, but her phone was in her hand. She was texting. Probably him. That broke me all over again. I started tracing back memories like an investigator piecing together a case. The work conference she'd attended in Denver last winter? She brought back a mug for me. I still had it. I looked up the conference. It didn't exist. Her girls' trip in March? Her friend Lacey had mentioned seeing her at the mall that same weekend. Alone. That lie had been sloppy. And slowly, with each piece, my image of her morphed. She wasn't the woman I'd married. Maybe she never was. Maybe I'd just chosen to believe the version of her that made me feel like someone worth being loved. The worst part? She was still trying. She left a note on my pillow one morning. Just 3 lines scrolled in her messy handwriting. I miss you. I know I broke you, but I still believe in us. I sat there for 20 minutes, just staring at it. Not reading it, staring, because I couldn't tell if it was a confession or manipulation. And maybe it was both. That afternoon, I left the apartment. I didn't tell her where I was going. I just walked, then got in my car and drove to my brother's house across town. Vince had always said she was too shiny. That was his word. Shiny things distract you, Halden. Be careful. Sometimes they're just polished lies. I hadn't seen him in months. We drifted, not out of conflict, just out of life happening too fast in separate lanes. But he opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask a thing. Just stepped aside and said, "Come in." We talked for 5 hours. Or rather, I talked. He listened. I told him everything. How I found out, what she said, what she didn't say, what I said back. How I didn't scream even when I wanted to rip the walls apart. At the end of it, he poured me a glass of something brown and strong and said, "So, what now?" I told him I didn't know because I really didn't. But for the first time in days, I felt like maybe that was okay. Maybe the first step wasn't figuring out what I wanted to do with her. Maybe it was figuring out what I had left of myself. That night, I stayed in the guest room. I slept. Actually slept. No dreams, no jump scares at 3 a.m. No pretending not to cry. Just me, a quiet ceiling, and a truth I was slowly learning to live with. She broke something in me I didn't know could break. And now I had to decide if I'd ever let her near it again. It was strange how quickly people adapt to absence. You expect it to feel like a hole, but instead, it just becomes space. A silent space where no arguments happen. No coffee gets made for two. No perfume lingers on a shared pillow. Just stillness. I stayed with Vince for a few more days. He didn't ask when I was going back, and I didn't offer. We didn't talk about her after that first night. Instead, we played chess. We grilled cheap burgers. We watched old action movies we both pretended not to enjoy but secretly always had. I didn't check my phone much. I saw the notifications piling up from her. Missed calls, texts, voicemails I wasn't ready to hear. On day 4, I finally opened one. "I don't know how to fix this, but I still love you. Please come home." I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand, but because I wasn't sure what home even meant anymore. The apartment had become a crime scene to me, except there was no police tape, and the suspect kept making tea like nothing happened. That night, Vince and I sat on the porch in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Then he said, "You ever think maybe she's just good at playing human?" It hit me harder than I thought it would, because that's exactly what it felt like. Like everything had been an act. Loving me, apologizing, even her guilt. Maybe not from the beginning, but long enough to blur what was real. And that thought, that maybe I had loved someone who was only ever pretending, that terrified me more than the cheating itself. The next morning, I told Vince I needed to go back. Not to forgive, not to reconcile, but to see it again with clear eyes. He didn't question me, just handed me a thermos of coffee and said, "If you need to torch it all to the ground, just give me a heads up so I can bring marshmallows." When I walked back into the apartment, she was sitting on the edge of the couch with her knees pulled up, like a child who expected punishment. Her eyes were puffy, makeup smudged. She looked human again for a moment, but I didn't trust that moment. She stood up quickly, like the sight of me was a rescue boat. "Halden, God, I didn't know if you were ever coming back." "I'm not," I said, carefully placing my bag down by the door. "I'm just here to talk." That stopped her. I didn't bring a suitcase. I didn't bring a plan. I brought questions. That's all. She nodded slowly, cautiously. "Okay, ask." So I did. I asked her how long it had been going on. She said almost a year. I asked her how they met. She said he was a customer at her store. Charismatic, flirty. Said all the things I stopped saying. I asked her what she told him about me. And this part, I'll never forget. She said, "I told him you were a good man, but boring." That word, boring, cut through me in a way betrayal hadn't. Boring. Not cruel, not neglectful, not toxic. Just not enough excitement for her. I didn't speak. Couldn't. She cried, real tears this time. "Halden, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I broke something that might never heal, but I'm begging you. Don't throw it all away over one mistake." "One?" I asked, finally finding my voice. "You met him for almost a year. That's not a mistake, Marble. That's a second life. She said she understood, that she'd wait, that she would give me whatever time I needed, that she wouldn't date, wouldn't see anyone else, wouldn't breathe without my permission if that's what it took. I didn't believe her, not really, but I nodded because I wasn't ready for the next step yet. I needed more than space now. I needed clarity. I needed to know what it meant to be me again without her in the picture. I didn't just need to decide whether to leave her. I needed to remember why I ever stayed. Before I walked out that door again, she asked quietly, "Should I keep hoping?" I paused, looked her in the eyes, and said, "I think hope is what got us here in the first place." And I left. After I walked out that morning, I didn't go back to Vince's place. I just drove. No direction, no GPS. I passed neighborhoods I didn't recognize and parked near a lake I hadn't visited since college. I didn't bring a change of clothes or a journal or anything that might have helped me organize my thoughts. I wasn't trying to figure things out anymore. I was trying to feel something that wasn't shame. It's hard to explain the guilt you carry when you're the one who's been betrayed. It's not rational. It's not even fair. But it's there, like you failed a test you didn't know you were taking, like somewhere along the way you became forgettable, replaceable. That maybe you weren't enough, even though you gave everything you had. I sat by the water for hours, tossing pebbles into the lake like some kind of sad metaphor. People walked by, couples, parents with kids, runners with earbuds, and I wondered how many of them were living lies, too. I wondered how many smiles were masks, how many phone calls were cover-ups. Eventually, my phone buzzed. It was a text. Not from Marble, not from anyone I expected. It was from Lacey, her best friend. "I don't want to get involved, but I think you should know. You weren't crazy. You just didn't know where to look." I stared at it for a while, confused, then typed back, "What are you trying to say?" She replied almost instantly, "She's been lying longer than you think." It wasn't just Grant. My stomach dropped. I didn't know whether to reply, scream, or just shut off the phone and pretend I hadn't seen it. I chose silence. I sat with that new weight pressing on my chest. And in that moment, something in me hardened. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was grief turning into clarity. Marble didn't just make a mistake. She built a system, a pattern, a parallel life that ran alongside mine. Smiling when I smiled, touching my hand while her mind was elsewhere. This wasn't about one affair. This was about who she had become, and who I had let her become beside me while I kept shrinking myself to make her shine. That night, I checked into a motel. Not the kind she used, thank God. This one was clean, cold, and smelled like bleach. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan spin like a clock with no numbers. The reality was beginning to settle in. I wasn't going back. Even if I returned to the apartment, even if we tried counseling, even if she cried every night for the rest of her life, I wasn't going back, because something had snapped in me the moment I realized she hadn't just betrayed me physically. She betrayed the narrative I had lived inside for years. She had rewritten our story behind my back. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not because I was ready to file, not yet, but because I needed to know what that path looked like. I needed to touch the exit door, even if I wasn't ready to open it. The lawyer's name was Elena Boone. She sounded young on the phone but sharp, kind, but not soft. I told her I wasn't sure what I wanted. She said, "That's okay. You don't have to want it. You just have to understand it. I can help you with that." She asked if there was a prenup. There wasn't. She asked if there were kids. There weren't. She asked if there were any joint accounts or shared debt. There were both. I didn't realize how tangled we were financially until someone laid it out in spreadsheet language. My name was on everything. The apartment, the credit cards, even her car. My kindness over the years had become her leverage. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the motel wall, realizing that love had not only cost me emotionally, it had buried me legally. Still, I didn't regret the call. It was the first thing I'd done entirely for me in months. Later that day, I got another text from Lacey. "I shouldn't have waited this long to say something, but if you need the truth, I'll give it to you. All of it. Just say when." I stared at those words for a long time, and then I typed back, "Tomorrow noon. I'll bring coffee." Because for the first time since this all began, I wasn't scared of knowing the truth. I was scared I'd been too comfortable never asking for it. Lacey met me at a quiet park halfway between her apartment and the wreckage of mine. She arrived early and waited at a wooden table near the walking path, nervously picking at the edge of her cardboard coffee cup. I brought her a cappuccino like I promised, but as I sat down and handed it to her, I realized I could barely make eye contact. She had been Marble's best friend for years, at our wedding, on our holidays, even in our photo albums. I didn't know if I was about to gain an ally or lose another piece of my history. "Thanks for coming," she said first. Her voice was soft, not in a sweet way, but in the kind of voice people use when they're walking barefoot through broken glass. I nodded. "You said you'd tell me everything." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry I waited this long. I always liked you, Halden. You were never the problem. That's the worst part." I didn't know what to say to that, so I let her talk. She started drifting maybe 2 years ago. Lacey said it was small stuff at first. Flirty messages, long errands she didn't explain. I asked once if she was okay, if she was happy, and she just said, "Halden's fine, but fine isn't thrilling, you know?" I clenched my jaw but said nothing. She met Grant last year, but before him, there was someone else. I blinked. "What?" Lacey nodded. "A guy from her gym. That's why she started going so often. Said she needed a new routine. He was married. It didn't last long, but I think that was the first time she crossed the line. And after that, it just got easier." It felt like every word she said pushed me further underwater. I thought the motel incident was the beginning, but it wasn't. It was just the part one saw. "She never told me the details," Lacey continued, "but sometimes after those nights, she'd show up to brunch glowing, giddy, like she was getting away with something. She even once said, 'If Halden ever finds out, maybe it'll finally wake him up.' Like her betrayal was something she deserved to trigger. That one hit hardest. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, trying to keep the shake out of my voice. I was scared. I didn't want to betray her. And honestly, I think I convinced myself it wasn't my business. But then I saw the look on your face after that motel night, and I realized I'd protected the wrong person. We sat in silence for a moment. Leaves rustled overhead. A kid passed by on a scooter, oblivious to the quiet war unraveling between us. "There's more," she said. I looked at her. "How much more?" Lacey hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen, hesitated again, then turned it toward me. It was a screenshot from over a year ago, texts between her and Marble. My stomach dropped as I read them. "Marble. Halden's obsessed with making me feel loved. It's exhausting. He treats me like some fairy tale." Lacey, "Isn't that a good thing?" Marble, "Not when you outgrow the role. I want danger. I want heat. Not a man who writes manuals and folds laundry." There it was. All my efforts to be a decent husband, laid out like punchlines in someone else's joke. "You were never boring," Lacey said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. "She just got addicted to chaos. And she couldn't stand that you gave her peace." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Not here. Not now." "I appreciate you telling me," I said. She looked down. I hope you do what's right for you now. Not her. Not the past. Just you." I stood up, not out of anger, but necessity. I needed to move. I needed to feel my feet on the ground to remind myself the world hadn't crumbled completely, even if everything inside me had. "I don't think I even know what that looks like," I muttered. "You will," she said. "You will when you stop asking who she was and start remembering who you are." I walked back to my car in a daze. The sky was overcast, but there was no rain. The clouds just hovered like they were waiting for permission to break open. And for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel lost. I felt betrayed, yes, but I also felt unshackled because now I knew she didn't just cheat on me. She cheated on the man who loved her more than she ever loved herself. That evening, I returned to the apartment for the last time. The place was quiet, darker than I remembered it. She had dimmed the lights, maybe trying to create some kind of calm, or maybe trying to hide. Marble was sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, wearing the same old college sweatshirt she used to wear during storms. She looked up at me like she had something rehearsed, but I stopped her with a small shake of my head. "No speeches," I said gently. "Not tonight." She nodded slowly, biting her lower lip like she was trying to hold in both her tears and her excuses. I walked past her and into the bedroom. I grabbed the rest of my clothes, nothing much, just what I needed to start fresh. A few books, my favorite hoodie, the leather journal I hadn't written in since our 3rd anniversary. I looked around one last time at the bed, the framed picture above it, the lamp she always left tilted, and then I exhaled, like my lungs were releasing 3 years of confusion in one breath. Back in the living room, she stood up. "So, this is it?" she asked, her voice cracked but calm. I nodded. "Yeah, this is it." She stepped toward me, almost like she wanted to reach out, but she didn't. "I wish I could undo it." "I know," I replied. "But honestly, Marble, I don't wish that anymore." Her face scrunched. "You don't?" "No," I said, "because I needed this. I needed the lie to be this loud, so I could stop whispering to myself that everything was okay." We stood there in silence for a beat. Then she asked, "Will you hate me?" I looked her in the eyes, really looked. "No," I said. "Honestly, I won't give you that much space in my future." She closed her eyes at that, and I walked to the door. Before I opened it, I said one final thing. "You were part of my story, but you're not the ending." And I left. The months that followed weren't perfect. Healing never is, but they were mine. I moved into a quiet one-bedroom near the river. Just me, my thoughts, and the sound of something resembling peace. I went back to therapy, not couples therapy, just for me. I didn't want to repair anything. I wanted to rebuild. I picked up hobbies I'd long abandoned, started drawing again, wrote in that old leather journal almost every night. Some nights were hard, sure. Grief doesn't respect the calendar. But every morning, I woke up and made my own coffee, sat in my own silence, and realized I wasn't broken. I was free. One Saturday, I found myself at the same lake where I'd sat tossing pebbles into the water, drowning in silence. This time, I brought a sketch pad. I didn't draw anything fancy, just the reflection of the trees on the surface, but it felt real. Mine, untouched. A woman passed by, walking her dog. She smiled at me. I smiled back. Nothing dramatic, just one human acknowledging another. It was the first time I'd looked at someone without flinching. Weeks turned into seasons. I saw Lacey again, just as friends. No hidden intentions, no messy overlap, just two people who'd both been collateral in someone else's fire, finding quiet in the aftermath. And the best part? I stopped needing closure from Marble because I realized I already had it. The closure wasn't in the explanation. It was in the decision. The decision to choose myself, to walk away not with vengeance, not with rage, but with something far more dangerous to a liar: peace. And peace, I've learned, is the best kind of revenge.